Hello everybody, we're back and I got 3 more pots for you today. And somebody yesterday asked me if I could cut one of my pots in half and show you guys like what the interiors look like. And so today I actually had 2 failures, but the first one was too bad to be able to cut it, so really got messed up. But another one, it just didn't. It was one of those pots that it just doesn't feel right, you know. If you have a form that you're trying to make, you sort of understand there's almost this ratio, right, that happens, or a percentage, and you only take a certain percentage, and then everything else you kind of just let it be wedged back up, you know. I think that's also really important, especially when you're trying to make new forms, that you sort of have these definitive rules in your brain while you're making of what's acceptable and what's not, you know. Some people might think it's being a little bit too hard on your work, but I also think it's really important to sort of see that. And also you got to be aware that sometimes when things fail, it's not necessarily a failure, right? Some of the pots that I've been making, after they're done and they're just waiting to dry, sometimes they'll just totally fall and collapse. But I had this really amazing moment of I was wow, these are trees. It's you can see through the fallen tree. It's a trunk that's fallen, and I just get really excited about those. And so that for me wasn't necessarily a failure. It's actually a sort of success in a way. It's I call it a blissful blessing or a God sprinkle, right? It's these things that you didn't really know, or it's a little bit more than a coincidence, right? It's something, maybe I have to explain it. It's imagine every single moment in your life, there's these jars that are placed in front of you, right? And each and every single one of these jars is filled with a sprinkle, right? And as you're moving every second through, you're grabbing a jar. And you open up the jar and you just pick a random sprinkle out, right? And so the God sprinkle is, imagine there's one golden sprinkle in that jar of every moment. And sometimes you might pick the right jar, but you don't necessarily pick the God sprinkle. But there's other times when the God sprinkle presents itself, and that's what I feel sometimes failures can present, is the God sprinkle. And so that's sort of my way to and God sprinkle isn't necessarily religious tide, you know. I hope it's can be separated from divinity, but have that level of impact. But anyway, back to the pots. You can see on these pots there was really getting some really great twists in the body. You can see on the pot on the left, it's really starting to lean to the side, and I think the one on the left here is really a great pot. I think a couple of them do that sort of tilting, even the middle one just there. I mean, just look at the way it sort of tilts to the side, and I wish that they would just stay exactly like that, but sometimes they do fall over a little bit, and I try to reset them, and it ruins some of the magic. But I also know that if I want to save some of them, that they need to kind of go back. But yeah, in a second here, I'm gonna have the pot of me cutting, come through, and I think some things before I get there. And it's gonna switch over here in a second. Yeah, maybe I'll just go now. Wait, no, I gotta explain it first. The cylinders, right? When you make a cylinder, the goal is to make it totally the same thickness, right? But these pots, after the cylinder form, it's really about forgetting about these sort of consistencies of normal pottery, right? It's not a functional thing, you know. So it can be thick and really thin on the top, and they really do get quite thin on the top because it's all even. And so you can imagine when I pull it out, it gets really thin on the top, you know. And when I compress and do that stuff on the middle, it really gets pretty thick. I'm Tonkin, but don't listen to that. No, listen to this, Noah. But dang, that went by really fast. Shit. But man. Maybe I'll I'll put it in at the end here again, and we'll talk about it for a little bit more. And so you can see the thickness on the bottom. It is really thick compared to that top, and a lot of people don't want that sort of thing, you know. This one, it failed, so that one was sort of just like a failure pot, and I knew it was going to be a little bit too thick on that bottom. Still a little bit too thick, but you can sort of see how noodly it gets. Like the noodly part is really unstable, and there's probably like little pockets of air. And a lot of people will tell you that like, oh, you need to like poke holes and like for air bubbles. But I saw somebody once told me if you go slow enough during certain phases of your heating up cycle, right? People call it quartz inversion, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's like around like the 600, 500 degree area, like Fahrenheit wise. And what you're really wanting is you want to go really slow through there. And if you do that, usually you won't have too many problems with air bubbles. You know, I've had completely hollow objects that were closed and no pocket, and they were like totally fine. Obviously, like sometimes it gets a little bit sketchy once you start refiring things, especially if it's glazed. You don't want it to like explode and get glaze shards everywhere. But usually, if you're going pretty slow, you're okay. Like, don't trust those automatic like slow fire, slow glaze on some of these kilns. Like, you really want to like find a kiln schedule that goes through and type it out manually. It's not too hard once you start to like figure out how to do that sort of stuff, but I think that really helps. But anyway, back to the thickness. I mean, I'm really talking for a long time after this video. Sorry about that. But this pot, it's not. Some things about it that I didn't really like. I think that's a good thing to start. Is this when it fell, the rim integrity was lost. Right? There was nothing on that top rim that was sort of seductive, that wanted to caught my gaze and kept it, right? Like some of these other pots, there's some really cool contrapposto of the trunk of the pot, or there's some really interesting stuff happening with the skirt, or on the top ledge it folds really nicely, or it's really like sexy on some of the top edges. But this one, it felt like a wet sock that somebody like left out on like a fence. You know, it really didn't have a lot going for it. I messed up quite a bit through the throwing phase, and there was some thin parts and some thick parts that caused it to buckle. And it sort of happened in the middle part of this video, if you go back and watch that. But on this other pot, it was just too much for me to save, and so as soon as I saw how it ended up on that top, when the top came down like that, I knew that it was just not really a great pot. But I don't really know what else to say about the wall thickness and stuff. But I don't ever trim the bottoms of these. Sometimes I would like stamp them on like a plaster thrown thing that I made, and it would make some design on the bottom. But I also realized like a lot of people aren't gonna like flip these over, and you know, for a long time I thought that like treating the bottom of a pot is like it's a sign of professionalism, you know. And then later on down the line of making, I was like, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. If it floats your boat and you think it's just the end all be all of pots, that's great. But for me, the end all be all is the form that it appears to the eye. You know, I really, it sounds kind of like lazy, but trust me, it's not a lazy thing. When you can bring your one aspect up so much, and if that's like what you're highlighting, somebody once told me it's like if you go crazy, you got to go crazy all the way, right? And I think I'm in the process of doing that, and the bottoms of the pots never really grabbed my attention like the form and the throwing part. That's why I don't use like a torch to dry things out, because the collapse and just that 10 minutes where I'm just like, sitting there focusing on this pot, right? that's the key for me, you know. Like whatever happens after those 10 minutes, that's just the way that pot was set out to be. And if it made it through the whole process, then it's a good one, you know. But thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this one went on a little bit too long. I got a lot more editing. I gotta fill up all this space with some other stuff maybe. But again, thanks again for watching. All the best and strong mentality. Peace.